I just want to explore the coach-athlete relationship. It's something that I found has really kind of been key to my philosophy in coaching. I started coaching or mentoring the junior team back in 2015 while I was still competing, and I really enjoyed it. Got asked to go away with the para team in 2017 to cover some coaching shortfall, and then on the back of that was asked to go in as a consultant a couple of days a week, and then found myself applying for a job with Archery GB as a para coach. So for me, there's kind of a few main styles of coaching that I've experienced both as an athlete and actually on the coaching line. First one is kind of autocratic, so it's the my way or the highway kind of approach, where the coach makes all of the decisions and there's nothing coming from the athlete. It's quite inflexible in its structure. A lot of young athletes benefit from this style when they're learning raw skills, but it can damage their development in the long term as they fail to develop the autonomy they need. It tends to work slightly better with older athletes as well, because they understand about what you're asking them to do. Then I think you've got the democratic coaching, which is something that a lot of people use. So it's the coach facilitating the decision making and the goal setting along with the athlete. So as part of Archery GB, we have something called an individual performance plan, which is where we'd sit down with the athlete and discuss the goals and the structure for the year, and we'd put that into a plan. So it's agreed between us. It's very much athlete centered, and it's for them to share their objectives. There's a lot of autonomy in that. They can act on their own values and interests, and they can actively collaborate in their development and the direction that they want their archery to go. And then I suppose you're moving on to a more holistic approach, where I suppose the theory behind that is a happy athlete will equal a successful athlete. There's very little in terms of structure, and the coach creates an environment where the athletes feel comfortable and safe exploring their skill development in their own time and at their own pace. Probably best suited to more mature athletes that have an understanding of the skill and also where they want their archery to go. And it requires a lot of time for the coach to invest in the relationship and the commitment to the athlete as a person, and not just an archer. So moving on from that is there a right style for coaching? No. We have multiple people with multiple characters, and you will find that sometimes you have to be quite direct in your approach in order to help them get through something. And it falls down to personal experience and values and how you want to move forward as a coach as well. I find the autocratic style quite, hard. I don't enjoy seeing somebody shouted at or somebody having just a constant sort of reminder of the same thing. If the message isn't landing, then you have to change the message.
I was going to actually ask you about how you pick your way of coaching, which you've just answered, which is great. But it's, I guess, what's the philosophy behind your coaching philosophy? Would you say?
So for me, it's very much about connecting with the audience, using language that is personal to me, or being me. So there's no point in taking somebody else's language and trying to to put it into a session, I have to be authentic with who I am. I like to go in and I like to motivate. So straight off the bat, I want the environment as like buzzing, happy, enthusiastic. I like to treat people fairly, and I have to have some degree of flexibility. And I've probably learned that more since I've been a para coach. That with the people that I deal with, there is such a variety of ages, experiences, and disabilities that I have to tailor each session very personally to each person. So there is no like manual for me to refer to.
There's like, no, you can't just treat everyone the same. You've got to work with each archer differently, I guess, depending on who they are.
Yeah, and what mood they're in that day, and whether they're disappointed in a performance or a training session. Very much it's quite organic, I think, the way that I work. I have an outline of what I want to do in a day, but it can change based on my audience. You know, somebody might have had a horrific night's sleep, be in a bad mood, and it's up to me to try and motivate them to get something out of that session. So I think the first thing that I would do in the mornings when I go in, and Sarah, you've probably seen it, is I go test the temperature with just some general conversation, because I find I learn more about the person when I'm having general conversation and kind of finding the level that they're at that morning or that afternoon, than if I just rocked up, sat down and started a session. So very much for me in the pre-work is where my brain's going, right, where are we going today?
Would that probably be like the key thing in building a good relationship with your archer, that kind of relaxed friendship kind of way? Maybe not quite friendship's the right word I'm thinking of.
Yeah, it's an informal interaction. So
yeah.
with my guys, like if somebody's having a rough day, I take them for a coffee and we chat it through. It's not just about on the line. I think building the relationship is as much work off the line as it is on the line for me. So if I'm away at an international competition, I take the time in the evenings, even if I'm absolutely hanging and on my knees, to actually spend a little bit of social time, because then I'm finding, are you nervous? What are your feelings about this? That don't necessarily come out on a field, because people tend to be very guarded when they're on a field of and their competitors are around them. So for me, it's invaluable information.
That's really great, because I get to see you work with your guys a lot, and they always look like they're having a great time. Like they're there to work, but they're always shooting really well, and they just seem really happy to be there, which I think that's a testament to how great of a coach you are. But then, like you mentioned a second ago, how do you deal with those athletes that are a bit more maverick? These maverick athletes, how would you handle them?
I've got like maverick athletes. I think elite sport can be a dark place, and you get all sorts of characters, and it's figuring out why they are that maverick. So sometimes it's through boredom, like you've set a session and they're just not engaging with it. It's gaining respect, and that's a two-way thing. And I think with those maverick athletes, you just have to flex a little more to find your in. You know, it is difficult. I've had a few maverick athletes in my time, and John always used to put me with the group that was the most complicated with the juniors. And I kind of enjoy it, because there's never a day when it's the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, just also setting the boundaries out. Now, you know, and I think some people struggle with the fact that boundaries can be different for different people. So it's being flexible and kind of knowing that if your maverick athlete pushes the buttons a little bit, that you're ready for that and not to react, and to try and kind of bring them round to doing something. It's usually your more experienced archers that have been around a while, or that's what I've found anyway.
Yeah. I guess that also then kind of links into, as with all the trips we've been on, that you've got an athlete who's not had a great performance that day, or they're just in a bad mood, they've turned up to training and they're just not feeling it. How would you go about working with them that day?
It's difficult. If somebody's had a disappointing performance, you have to give them the space to breathe and to kind of accept things in their way. But I would always have a good debrief with that athlete at some point, maybe a short hot debrief on the immediately after, and then later on in that evening working through what went right, because there will be things that have gone right that somebody's overlooked, and also what's gone wrong. And it's not unusual for me to be out on the practice field with athletes late into the evening, just to give them a little bit of security, I suppose, and to know that we can work through stuff. I think it's knowing that they've got somebody to fall back on, and that's the way I see coaching, that I'm there as a support. I have to know when to apply pressure, and there are moments when you do have to get in the face of someone, I suppose, in the heat of a match where things are tight, you've got 15 arrows, you need to flick a switch. And that's quite unusual for me. I find that quite hard to do, almost. I'm a bit more laid back in my coaching style than I was as an athlete. Anyway, I was quite fiery as an athlete. And I think I need to know when to relieve pressure, if I can at any point.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful, especially because you came with us to Berlin last year, to that World Cup, and we had horrendous wind. It was probably the worst World Cup I've ever been to in terms of weather conditions. And you helped us out with our recurve men and recurve ladies. And I think I remember seeing the recurve men really struggling, and then you came and chatted to them, and then it was like literally like that flick of a switch. It really helped them out.
Yeah, because I think you get, as an archer, you get very blinkered in what you're doing, and as a coach, you're kind of eyes on the whole field. And I think I just said to the men at the time, guys, nobody's doing anything special. Everybody's having these flyers. And when they kind of looked at it, and then they settled down a little bit, but it's giving, I suppose it's giving a bit of a reality check sometimes, because you can get very blinkered and in your own bubble, and you don't really see what's going on.
Yeah. I think Thomas has had a question. Thomas asks, would you tell / advise another coach how to coach if you thought they were not doing it as you would do it yourself?
No. If I was asked advice from a coach, then yes, I wouldn't tell somebody, because I think coaching style is all about your makeup as well. My makeup is different to the other coaches on the squad. We complement each other very well with our skills. So I wouldn't go and tell somebody that they weren't coaching the right way, because there is no right way, as far as I can see. All I'm giving you is an insight into my way, I suppose, of coaching. Thank you, good answer, that's okay.
I guess another question that I have, I know we've chatted about it, are there any resources that you direct people to in terms of like books, podcasts, videos, anything like that you think could help people in terms of developing themselves as a coach? And
during lockdown, I've certainly started reading more. So I've read Eddie Jones's book. It's a really good insight as to somebody that's taken coaching all the way from club level all the way up to being head coach for multiple world-class teams. And there's some real good nuggets of information in that. What I probably would say as well is during this lockdown time, the relationships that I've built with my athletes has meant that actually I haven't struggled to stay connected. So each week, all of my athletes have connected with me in one way or another, whether it's a session on band drills, whether we're chatting through how we're going to plan the next phase, because the uncertainty at the moment for everyone is scary. And I suppose my job is to actually soak that up like a sponge and actually put a positive twist on it. And I think, especially the guys I'm working with, we've taken some real positives out of this time, but I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have the relationships with the guys beforehand.
That's a really good point. Declan has a question. He asks, what was your experience of your coach-athlete relationship when you were an archer?
I didn't actually have a specific coach. During my time on the compound team, we relied on each other a lot more in terms of knowledge. And I've tried multiple people in the coach's box, and some people just don't work. You kind of, I think it's a skill to be in the coach's box at times, because there's so much going on, and if your athlete's having a meltdown or if they're having the day of their life, you have to, for me, you have to stay at a level. You can't go on that roller coaster with them. So I had a club coach that I still talk to, so that relationship was key to me, and I always go back to that. But I didn't ever have a coach while I was shooting compound. Come on, there's got to be some more questions.
I've got one. I've got another one. Oh, Hannah's got one. How do you set the boundaries in terms of between your athlete and yourself?
Tricky. I think safety is obviously paramount. There has to be that level of respect there. I wouldn't expect anybody, and I wouldn't expect to actually shout, use language that was inappropriate for that person. You know, if you're dealing with kids, you tailor it very differently to if you were dealing with, say, your maverick athlete, where some of the language can be quite colourful, but that's with that one person. I think just making it fun and an enthusiastic environment to be in. I think the boundaries are naturally there. I think everybody knows what they are, especially within a squad setting, because they set their own values. So for me, it's whether you think somebody's pushed through that too much, or whether somebody's just testing whether they can bash the boundary a little bit to see if there's any movement.
Jessica has a really good question as well. She asks, when coaching juniors, do you build a relationship with their parents or the carers?
Yeah, I think that's key. Obviously, with juniors, the parents are usually around. If you can actually work with the parents so that when a junior goes away to the club, they can keep the message going of the sessions that you've done. And also within our squad, we have what would I say, vulnerable adults, where sometimes you're not sure whether the message has landed. So again, key that those lines of communication are open so that nothing's misinterpreted. And I think parents do a great job in ferrying their kids around the country. So giving them a few key things to keep an eye on and a few key phrases, and including them within that relationship just helps everything move more smoothly.
I want to take you back to Berlin again, because that was our first gold medal for Great Britain in a long time, and you were with Ella and James getting them through their matches. I just want to talk about maybe how did you support those pair as they were going through their each match after a time? But it was so windy even still then, and keeping them focused on what they were doing. Like, how did you help them get through that?
I think it kind of goes back to the ranking round first of all, that I was there and actually helped them all through quite a tricky ranking round. It was probably one of the worst competitions I'd been to. So again, there's a little bit of relationship building there, that they're confident that you're supporting them, that you're not letting them spiral out of control. And then when we got to the mixed team matches, again, it was just like, we accept what we get. As long as we've done our best, we accept what we get and we move on, because it was changing so quickly from end to end. I found it, I'd worked a little bit with Ella and I've been on teams with James. It was probably a little bit of a weird one in terms of coach-athlete relationship, because I was kind of thrown out to Berlin with a group of people that, yes, I know, but I don't particularly have relationships with it in a coach-athlete way. And I suppose it wasn't so long ago as I was on the shooting line with them, so it was a different kind of atmosphere, but I enjoyed it. I mean, I think coaching it's not about you, and that's my big sort of thing at the moment. It's not about me, it's about what the athlete needs and wants, and I need to be able to put competitive hurdles in front of the athletes that I work with in order for them to grow. But I think the art of coaching is knowing when to know which person at which time can get over that hurdle, and then kind of challenging them to do it.
I think that actually brings us on really nicely to Sandy's question of how do you deal with an athlete who's having a meltdown during a competition?
Sometimes a bit of humour helps. I think it's knowing the athlete inside out. You will have chatted multiple times during coaching sessions, and you get a feel for if somebody's on that edge or is on a meltdown, what you can do to help them out of it. Sometimes it's being empathetic and just being that shoulder to cry on. Sometimes you just have to get a little kind of stricter or a bit firmer with somebody to try and snap them out of it. Depends what part of the competition you're in. If you're in qualification, it's not so much of an issue, but if you're in the middle of a match, then you've got to try and solve the problem real quick. And the only way you can do that is by knowing what makes that person tick, and almost what words are going to pull them out of that.
I guess that goes back to having that relationship with your athlete again.
Yeah, and using the kind of language that they understand. So you might have a young athlete who is very meek and mild, so your language would be very different to some more experienced archer that is sort of been in the heat of battle multiple times and knows what they're capable of. So you very much have to tailor the language and the actual message for that person.
No, that is definitely really important, especially when we've been on trips. Like, it can be so intense sometimes. I've got a few more questions. Malcolm asks, do the performance coaches ever involve local club coaches as part of the team in an athlete's programme?
Yes, we do. I have collaborated with somebody. It's very difficult when you've got a personal coach and a program coach. What we found sometimes is there's a bit of a conflict. So if you can keep the lines of communication open as to what you're doing, I think that actually helps the athlete, because what you don't want is the athlete in the middle of that sort of situation. So,
Yeah.
you know, me communicating well with a club or personal coach and vice versa.
That's really important. Yeah, I've actually seen you work really well with these guys. And then David and Julie ask, do you have a specific experience that you can talk about where it was a difficult situation? How did you approach it, and what language style did you use?
So I suppose my most difficult moment as a coach was having to tell somebody that they weren't going to be in a mixed team at the World Championships. Devastating for me, devastating for the athlete, but at that moment in time, I had their mental health at the forefront of my decision, because they'd had an absolute meltdown, and I just didn't want that to be the end of their archery career, because one more bad match and that could have been it. So for me, having to deliver the message was very tough. I tried to explain that it came from a place of care, but there was fallout from that. I found it difficult, and then I had to move on and coach the actual mixed team, which was a change. And you know, we were going for quota spots at the time, and then all through my head was, have I made the right decision? But at that time, I felt I made the right decision, not from an archery point of view, from a mental health of the athlete point of view, because I felt it would have killed them.
Yeah.
And the style of
Thomas has sorry, go on.
Yeah, the style of language was very much empathetic, very much, you know, telling them how devastated I was as much as they were, and trying to explain where that decision came from.
Yeah, I think I've seen you work with them since then, and it seems a really positive interaction. So I think ultimately that's a credit to both of you that you've worked really well still. Thomas has a question. How do you approach an athlete who expects to win and gets disheartened and disillusioned when they don't?
That's archery, isn't it? I suppose it depends. If they've fulfilled their potential, then it's a different conversation. We have a lot of athletes that have shot PBs and not won matches, and then they're disheartened and disillusioned. But I suppose from my point of view, then we have to work out how we can get better, and put a plan in place to actually get the most out of that athlete. I think with paras, for me, some of the categories, there is so much variation that you can only take some athletes so far depending on their disability. So sometimes you have to be realistic as well with those archers about what their capabilities are, and that's no sort of slight on them. It is a reality check at times.
Next question.
Yeah.
Guy asks, when clubs resume shooting, how would you address archers struggling to find previous form?
Really good question. So with the athletes I'm working with at the moment, we've maintained some bow drills and some band drills throughout this lockdown period. Some of my athletes are now being able to get out to clubs. What I've done is actually video call, and we've agreed that we're going to work back slowly from like 20 meters back to 50 meters rather than go straight back out to 50, because I think expectation of you shooting the distance that you normally shoot is going to be in the back of your head, and you're going to be looking at outcome over process. So for me, it's about building that confidence and that trust back in their process slowly, and then moving back as and when they're comfortable. We're probably looking for the para team. You know, people are starting to filter back into Lilleshall now, but we're probably not going to be back much before August. So we're looking at a block now from now until Christmas to work to get back.
I think then, just on top of that, how have you managed the relationships? Because we're going back into an Olympic Paralympic year after having that build up already. How have you been able to manage the athletes with having to they've almost had to go back to the start of preparing for that year again?
Yeah, so with my group, I've got one person who has got the qualifying criteria and the quota places for the game. So the approach to that is very much different to the guys that I'm working with that haven't got quota spots. I've gone in and said that it's a positive time for us because it allows us to build on things that we were building on, but we probably felt we were about 12 months short of where we needed to be competitive in that category. So I tried to put a positive spin on it. The guys have come along with me because I kind of turn up, I'm like, let's go, and had some quite structured sessions. Within that, we've done some mixed team via band work as well, just to give some variety to the session. So I've tried to make it fun, but with a purpose, because they're having to communicate via phone, so it's harder. So when we do get onto a field, it's going to appear easier for those guys. But yeah, the relationships that have been key to getting through this period.
And then I think another question was, how do you approach, I think you've kind of already covered this in terms of having difficult conversations, but how would you recommend our coaches to deal with having them similar difficult conversations, whether it's with a junior or a senior?
I think mine was like I had to make a split decision and go and do it. I think I'm very much a planner. I think I would probably sit down and run through the scenario and possibly actually lean on some of the other coaches to talk through how I was going to do that conversation, because they are tricky. You might not get the outcome you want, but I think with help, I'm not adverse to actually, you know, I use all the practitioners, and I use our tech support and other coaches to actually get the information I need firmly in my head so that I can actually deliver.
I guess it's using the support group that you have around you, whether it is parents for juniors or the other coach that they also have, or even, I guess, even maybe, would you ever use, if they have like a training partner?
I don't know. I think if you've got to have a difficult conversation, it's better done with just that one person. But like I said, on a squad, I'd probably lean on some of the other staff members to know that my thinking is right, and B, to know how to deal with it. It's tricky. I'm not a very confrontational person, so I find those types of conversations very difficult to have.
So then, I guess, like you were just saying, would you really plan these all sorts of interactions, whether positive and negative, in advance, and really think about the style that you need to use, like the coaching styles you were suggested in earlier? Would you find you'll flick between the three depending on what interaction you've got to have?
Yeah, I think if you're going to have a difficult conversation, you need to play out all the scenarios in your head. I think you also you need to know where you want that conversation to go and what you want the outcome to be, and you kind of need to plan for it to go sort of off on a tangent at times, but you need to be kind of getting yourself back on track quite quick. I'm lucky. I have to say I haven't had many difficult conversations with the athletes yet.
I think that's a credit to your coaching style. Whenever I see them, they're just all so relaxed, and they turn up and they crack on, and it's really nice to see, especially when it's long days at Lilleshall.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I've discovered is that you need to listen more than you talk. So me doing this today is like my worst nightmare, because I'm talking. Normally, I'm listening to somebody else. And I need to make sure that the athlete feels like they're being heard. That what they're saying is landing with me. Might not agree with it, then we can have a discussion about it. And it's not a no straight off the bat. It's let's have a discussion about that. I need them to know that they feel valued, and that they feel supported, and that the environment is safe for them to fail. Because you know, like I said earlier, we've got these hurdles that you need to go over in order to grow and improve, but it has to be done in a safe environment. So if you set somebody a task, it has to be achievable. There's no point sticking it out there to somebody and saying, I want you to go and shoot 700 today, when they're only a 600 shooter. It's not going to happen. So I have to tailor that. And I also need them to understand why I'm asking them to do something, and be quite explicit and specific in my language, so that they understand. And I also check for understanding.
Okay, I think that's really interesting to hear, to really stress the point that, especially with when we talk with some of our archers, that the archers need to be involved and to be heard, exactly like you said. I think that's so key. One of the Neil's had a question. How do you assess your own coaching so you can find ways to improve yourself?
I ask the guys that I work with for feedback. I've also been on a UK sport course that has actually maybe delved into quite a lot of things that I probably wouldn't have gone into about me and my style. I think also receiving feedback from the other coaches, practitioners, program manager, as to what I can do better, but I also want to know what I do well. I don't want to just be kind of criticised. So that's important. And for me, I'm relatively young on my coaching journey at the moment, and I see week by week. I think this lockdown period has given me a lot. Like for me, I felt frustrated at times, but I've also felt that my coaching has probably improved, because my communication skills have had to be absolutely A1, especially when you're on a video connection that's going horribly wrong at times.
I know what you mean. Adrian's had a question. Do you think there will be a new type of coaching method with social distancing in place?
Good Good question. I don't know. We're not going to be very hands-on for a little while, and especially for the para team, that's quite difficult. I don't think I will adjust my coaching style for social distancing. I think I can deliver my message the same way. I've had to do it via video, so actually being 2 meters away will be a joy.
Yeah, it must be all a bit weird coaching over a phone.
Yeah. I only get one view, although one of my athletes has taken to putting me in different views so that I can see different things, which is great.
Okay, that's really like inventive of them to help you. Thomas has had another question. Which is more important / effective, improving technique or the psychology needed to understand and help an athlete?
I would say initially you need to get a solid technique. I think depends on the level that you're coaching at as to how much the psychology comes into it. I would say certainly for our squads, there isn't a lot of change going on technically, so a lot of what we do now is with psychology help. But I would probably say that if you're in your club, that technically the coach can help you out loads and get a really good technique and training structure in place.
And that actually kind of brings me back to something you said earlier, that could you just kind of talk a bit more on the idea of it's safe to fail?
Yeah, so try and create an environment where you don't want an athlete to achieve something all easily all the time. And I think I said it earlier, you have to put hurdles in place, but you have to know when is the right time to either do a session that is quite hard and could get emotional, and be aware that on those sessions that you'll need to actually talk about it afterwards, rather than if you've had a failure, then letting the athlete kind of move on without giving any feedback. Like I said earlier, there's always positives to take out of it. And for me, I've let my athletes explore failure on their own, and then they've kind of gone, well, you could have told me I was going to fail, and I'm like, but would you have learned? You know, I'm not there I'm there to bounce ideas off sometimes, because you know it shouldn't all be about me and how I think something should happen, because I'm dealing with so many different characters. That you know, one person might want me to set sessions and be very rigid, whereas a lot of what I do is finding a way to unlock someone. So for instance, I had one athlete where I was like, tell me what your sight picture is. Like, I don't understand what you're seeing at the target, and tried to explain it to me, still couldn't understand. So I went off to the office, I cut out a sight, and I got a plotting sheet, and I'm like, show me. And
okay, that's really
cool. From then on, it opened up the discussion more, and I understood more about what that person was seeing and feeling than if we'd just gone down the route of just tell me.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of finding, not necessarily every archer learns from you just saying, I want you to do this. So trying to find different ways to express understanding to them.
Yeah, and I think through your coaching journey, you go on. So at the start, when you first, you know, when you've either got a young athlete or a new athlete, you're very much in front of them. They can see you're leading them, and then I think as as they develop their own autonomy and their own skills, you'll then be alongside them, rather than in front of them. And then I think the greatest compliment for a coach is when somebody is completely self-sufficient, automatic, and just you're there just to watch.
You almost become of no use to them at some point.
The best bit of when somebody gets it, it's the best bit, and actually being at a competition and watching somebody fly and not having to have any input is the greatest thing as a coach.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I guess it's quite different for athletes to go from competitions in this country where and then to have to go to an international. Like they're so intense when we go away, and it's managing. If you had an athlete it's their first ever international that they're going on, how would you help them getting from UK competitions to suddenly you're going all the way to I know you go to Dubai a lot, you're already going to Dubai. How would you help them in becoming used to that new atmosphere?
I think so part of, I suppose for me, I've got the experience of having shot at the highest level. So that's kind of the non-technical aspects of coaching that I've got these experiences, and I've got this knowledge that I can walk you through how things are going to be set out, how the field is going to be different, how, you know, the buzz, what goes on, there's cameras, there's this and that. So I don't see coaching as just technical. That's only one aspect of coaching. It's very much about what else you can bring in terms of experience, and yeah, I don't know what else to say.
I guess that's really similar to, so I remember going from my local league shoots to going to my first ever like junior national championships, and I went from a competition of like 10 targets to here's 70 targets all of a sudden. So I guess it's exactly the same as you're getting whether it's a junior or a senior who's just done their beginner's course a year ago, and then all of a sudden, yeah, they want to go and start doing their Yorks and the Herefords or the Feeters or whatever, and they've now got to go and go to a big competition like the national series, for example. And
yeah, and I think, and that's where emotional intelligence comes in. So the sport isn't just about the technical ability of somebody, it's about the whole person, and everybody's psychology, physiology, backgrounds, characters, they're all so different that it's a juggling act. And for me, I get the script wrong sometimes. I hold my hands up and get the script wrong, and what I should be saying to that person, I've said to that person, and they look at me like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I've got 6 people's like information in my head, and it is going to come out wrong sometimes. And it's how do I unlock that higher sense of potential? And you know, I'm still trying to figure it out myself. So I would say that I'm a very different coach to when I was an athlete. I was quite fiery, quite worked up. Now I think I have to be that sponge that takes all that emotion away, and actually is flat calm regardless of whether somebody's shot 3 10s or somebody's had a miss. You know, I can't change my facial expression, my body language still has to be, you've got this, you can still do this.
Yeah, I think that, and we really got to see that in Berlin, that I was watching archers go from, and even top archers, like I think the highest recurve men's score was like a 630 or something in the end, and I was watching archers put a 10 in, and then there'd be a 6, and it was just that you had no control over the conditions. And seeing you work with the compound girls especially was really great, that you just gave them that confidence that, yeah, it's going to be a rough day, so just push through. And that was really nice to see. And I think that kind of came from your experience as an athlete to a coach. Would you say there's a lot of things that you can pull out from your athlete career into coaching now?
Yeah, I do. I do impart my knowledge, but I try not to let it be about me, so that I don't colour somebody's judgment on something. I think knowledge is great. What I don't want to do is tell them this is the only way. I think sometimes they have to find that out for themselves. You know, in Dubai, I had my mixed team were slightly behind, and then we put a fantastic ending, and I'm like, guys, we got this, come on. And it's just never letting them give up, because you don't know what's going to happen until the last arrow is shot.
Yeah. Oh gosh, for sure. Let's see if we've got any more questions. I don't think we've had any more. Sorry if I've missed any. Please send them through if I've missed any. Oh, Danny. Danny asks, do you goal set and performance profile for yourself as a coach, as well as with your athletes? And if so, do you buddy up with another coach / colleague, sorry, to do this?
We do goal set as a coaching team. I would say that, again, it's not about me. So I suppose part of my goal setting is within the athlete's IPP as to what I think their potential is. We do performance profiles, so we have had psychological profiles done on our entire para staff team, and I think those conversations, it's opened up conversations so that we work better together. So for me, I'm a very logical person, and I like things done in a precise way. Well, if I've got somebody that is quite haphazard and chaotic, I then have to flex a little bit as much as they do, but I think it helps us become a better coaching team. I mean, our coaching team is 3 very different people with very different styles, but it works.
No, it's really great to see you, Charlotte, and Ricky seem to work really well together. David has a question. What are your highlight moments as a coach and athlete, and how do they compare?
Let me think. I think when I went away to cover for the Worlds, actually getting to know the guys, I met them at the airport. Never a good start.
No.
Point of view. But I met them at the airport, and I was lucky enough to be in the coach's box for W1s winning gold. I think that was a highlight, as well as being around or being asked to stand in the coach's box for one of our recurve athletes while her coach was with another of her athletes, and seeing her get a quota place for the games and the joy that brought. As an athlete, probably the Indoor World Cup in 2013 that I won.
That was in Vegas, right?
It was in Vegas. It was late at night, but no, that was probably one of my highlights, and potentially also Edinburgh, when my family and friends made the trip to watch me shoot.
Oh, I remember seeing some of the photos of that. That was really cool. I've got a couple more questions for you. Thomas asks, who has influenced you most in your approach and your career?
Probably my dad. He's not an archer, but I think my approach is similar. He's a businessman and quite calm and measured on making decisions, and I see myself like that. And I pick up things from lots of like athletes and coaches. I don't think there's one person in particular. You know, I've collaborated with the Olympic coach Richard sometimes when I've needed some help. So yeah, that's a really good question.
I guess that actually then brings you really nicely onto Mary's question in terms of developing yourself. She asks, what sort of CPD do you find useful as a performance coach?
Okay, so like I said, I've been on this athlete to coach journey. I found that exceptionally helpful in terms of my development. And I actually work with a coach developer on the back of that. So we have weekly catch-ups and chats, and he points me in directions. I'm still trying to find my feet and my coaching philosophy. So this year's been a bit difficult. I haven't done as much CPD as I should have done.
I guess that can't be helped at the minute.
Can't be helped, but I suppose the more I've also found, like, our athletes coach group, we've stayed in touch. So for me, we have a weekly Zoom call like this, and we put a question, each of us takes it in turns to chair it, and they're from a variety of sports, canoeing, judo, whatever, but I'm actually learning how people coach in different sports, and I think it's helping me.
Okay, yeah, that's quite cool that we can learn from other sports. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be locked within your own little group all the time. I think that's really important.
Work and just understanding how other people do things.
No, that sounds cool. Just going to check if we have any more questions. I think that's about it. If anyone else has anything else, please pop it in the box.